One of the most disturbing trends in our country today, to me, is the sexualization of young children and the exploitation of children. It is reprehensible. Well, sounds like Elena Barbera shares my disdain. She is also known as the based mother. What does that mean, Elena? And welcome to the truth.
Hello, thanks for having me. A based is a word that the cool kids use that just means somebody that tells it like it is, tells the truth, which I gather is something you enjoy also.
Well, it's something that is a significant value to me and part of who I hope my character reflects. So, Doge has been digging into fraud, waste, and abuse, and a lot of what they found is paying people to, like, where the NIH has paid people, as you've revealed, for just really off the wall, stupid stuff. But it seems like there's a political message embedded in all of it. Can you help us sort it out?
Well, it's hard to say because the amount of stupid stuff they've uncovered has been, is a pretty wide scope across the board. One of the things that bothers me the most, where my focus is the indoctrination of children. That we've spent billions of dollars across multiple organizations. Even in the Department of Defense, they were spending money to indoctrinate children in Department of Defense schools. So they operate public schools on bases in and out of the United States. So we had those. Then we had the Department of Education indoctrinating children to believe they're in the wrong body and to be talking about sexual attraction and sexuality as early as kindergarten. And the fact that my tax dollars are contributing to sexualizing children infuriates me.
Who could possibly be in favor of that? I mean, where would I mean to see it happening on such a grand scale would lead me to believe that there are a legion of people who, for some perverted, strange reason, think that that's an okay thing to do. I don't even know how to describe it. Whether it's certainly not the right thing to do, but what possible motivation would these people have?
The motivation, the long term goal is to normalize pedophilia. If you sexualize enough children within a generation, pedophilia will be normal. Who is doing it? Well, I don't know how long you've got, but I'll try to be quick. This started in the 1940s with a man named Alfred Kinsey, who, through his quote unquote science, determined that children are sexual from birth. He was supported by the Rockefeller Foundation at the time, and the Rockefeller Foundation decided to put together a model penal code which would exempt schools and libraries from criminal prosecution if they showed pornography to children. Those That penal code went around the country, and in 44 states they were able to pass a law that says that if you show a kid pornography at the mall or at the playground, a coffee shop, you will be criminally prosecuted. But if you do it in a library or a school, you can say it's educational and you will be exempted from prosecution. So it started way back then. Today, the people pushing it are the teachers' unions, the American Library Association. Planned Parenthood has materials in schools, and up until very recently, it was our very own Department of Education. And I'm not just calling these people out and saying, that there's no proof. You can go right now on, say, the American Library Association website, and they talk about quote unquote banned books. And if I read to you from those books, I would have to apologize to your wife for reading such filth
Well,
to
we
her
probably
husband.
couldn't discuss it on the radio, frankly. We would probably violate the FEC rules. And we
Yes.
do come to you every Saturday from 12 to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Nashville, Atlanta, Richmond, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Morgantown, West Virginia. $620,000 paid for an LGB inclusive teen pregnancy prevention program for transgender boys. $700,000 paid to study cannabis in sexual minority gender diverse individuals. $740,000 on examining social networks among Black and Latino sexual minority men in New Jersey. $50,000 on assessing the sexual health among LGBTQ plus Latinx youth in an agricultural community. I don't even know what this is. I literally, genuinely, truthfully do not know what this is. $75,000 on researching structural racism. There's more. I mean, this is insanity, but it's your tax dollars and my tax dollars. And where are the leaders of our country? Where are the members of Congress who spend the money? They appropriate. They make a budget. They appropriate the funds. Who is doing this stuff?
They appropriate the funds, they give it to organizations like USAID, and then there is zero oversight. And that is what the American people are waiting for. So we're finding out that all of these $1 million here, $1 billion there are being spent on absurdities. I mean, Latinx farm workers, teenage Latinx, LGBTQIA plus Two-Spirit farm workers. We needed to do a study on their social lives. Are you kidding me? So the American people like me, we're sitting out here and we're saying, okay, all right, you're telling us all this is out there. Who wrote the checks? Where did the checks go to exactly? Were there any kickbacks given to the people who are approving these?
I'd like the answer to that.
Billions of dollars. That's what we're waiting for now. And it's very frustrating because, without those answers, the left is, the opponents of the Trump administration are saying it's all lies. They're just making it up. And we need receipts to quiet them down.
So you've been on this mission for quite a while. You produced a documentary called The American Groomer. When did you produce that film?
I released it in November of 2023. And it's still getting legs, and it's still, gaining traction because unfortunately the film is about the sexualization of children in American public schools. And unfortunately, that topic is still not top of mind for every single American. And it should be. It
seems to me that this topic has been the source of a whisper campaign. It's like, it's so creepy. Nobody wants to talk about it, including me. And it seems to be just right beneath the surface. And you hear gossip and innuendo that child trafficking goes to the highest levels of our government, and that perhaps it's infected many of the leaders in our country. Do you have any evidence of that, or can you say whether that is a rumor or whether there's validity to it?
Well, when it comes to actual sexual abuse and sex trafficking at that level, I don't have that information, but we have tremendous suspicions with, all of the obvious. Why hasn't the Diddy guest list, party guest lists come out? Why haven't the Epstein lists been revealed? There are a lot of people, obviously, being protected. And what we've seen, this week alone, it being blown out of the water about who was running the country, who was controlling the auto pen. The American people, our conspiracy theories have come true one after another, like dominoes being knocked over. So,
well, why is no one, instead of talking about the auto pen, why are we not talking about forgery? I happen to have a legal background. I am a member of the Georgia Bar. And if you have the habit of using a mark, some people scribble. I mean, I don't know, like George Bush. I mean, you couldn't read George W. Bush's signature. I'd give you $100,000 if you could show me where the George is in George. It's just a scribble. So, the law really provides that you don't have to even sign your name with a pen. You can really sign your name with a rubber stamp. And your rubber stamp may just say BS. That could be your signature. And it's perfectly legal. what I'm trying to get to is that if you take someone else's mark and you use that without authority, that is forgery. That's a felony punishable by years of prison. Why aren't we talking about forgery and the stealing of Biden's signature?
You know, it's funny that you say that because that word has not been thrown around a lot in this conversation. We are talking about things like, are these pardons valid? Are any of these executive orders valid if the president didn't actually sign them?
If I sign
because
your
they
name,
were forged,
if I sign
as
your
you're
name
saying.
to a check and I take it to the bank and cash it, is the check valid? To me, it's no different. I mean, if someone steals your signature for whatever motivation they may have had, and affixes it to a piece of paper that has consequences, it is forgery. And I don't even know that it has to have consequences. Just the very act in itself is highly illegal. It is a felony.
Well, I do hope that forgery ends up on the list of charges, because yesterday it was announced that they actually have narrowed down the list of people who were in control of the auto pen. So I would think that forgery would be on their list of things that they're going to ultimately charge them with.
For sure. And who are on the list? I mean, I'm sure Dr. Jill and Hunter probably figure prominently. And then the chief of staff, whose name I don't recall.
Yeah, there are conversations about whether, how in the past, forgive me for not remembering the exact situation, but there was a governor who was charged with selling pardons. And so they were even talking about, looking into was there cash exchanged for all the flurry of pardons that Joe Biden did not sign at the end of his term.
Well, I've been saying for 3 years on this program that our federal government is absolutely rotten to its core. And it is never going to get corrected until we start exposing the very people that are responsible for the illegality and the immorality that they have engaged in, that we expose them and hold them accountable. I really had great hopes for Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. I guess Dan Bongino is like your neighbor up there in Space Coast, right? And Pam Bondi, and with President Trump's encouragement and support, that they would begin to reveal these secrets. The information has been very slow in coming, and what has been released has been pretty inconsequential. And I would say that a vast majority of it was already in the public domain. So, I hate to say it, but it sounds like here we go again. Is this problem solvable?
Listen, I'm out here screaming the same things every day with a lot less grace than you are able to express yourself. I'm furious as an American. I used to trust teachers. I used to trust librarians. I used to think most politicians were good. Maybe there were a few corrupt ones. And it's been about 10 years now that I've woken up to the fact that we've been lied to. And, they've had the American people, frankly, over a barrel for decades, and we didn't know it. So I'm trying to wake people up to this. And I'm very impatient at this point.
It's as you should be, as well you should, because there's another child that is being exploited and corrupted at this very moment.
Yes, every American is being, on top of the children who are being sexually abused and indoctrinated, and medicalized and having healthy body parts cut off. You have the average American who are just being used, abused, and lied to, and having our tax dollars robbed from us, and having our country being driven into the ground. The thing is, and I have to just every day take myself back to center and remember that I do want, if anyone's going to be prosecuted, I do want airtight cases being built. And I am praying that is what this delay is on everything, on the
Bongino
corruption.
Said that very thing just last week in an interview that I watched him and Director Patel on. And he said, look, we can give it to you fast and wrong, or we can give it to you slow and correct. Which do you want? So I'm agreeing with your sentiment that you just explained. I'm willing to wait but I'm not willing to wait unless it's going to happen. That's what I need to
Yes.
be assured of. And, the way that Patel and Bongino so casually stated uncategorically that Epstein committed suicide, I don't know that I'm there yet. I mean, I really want to believe it, as opposed to his having been murdered while in a jail cell protected by men with badges and guns and cameras that, oh yeah, the cameras were off that day. Oh well, anyway, I just, I worry about this stuff, not so much for me, but I do worry about it for my children and my grandchildren. We seem to be speeding downhill at an ever increasing rate in a bad way.
We're America is yeah. If we stay on this path, we will be too far gone. We're already, I think, too far gone. I don't know how it is we're going to clean up the mess, because the corruption and the crime and the extortion and the blackmailing, it is all such a part of every level of government now. It's at the local level, the state level, the federal level, but when you think about a situation like Jeffrey Epstein killing himself or not, I don't think the American people are going to buy that he killed himself unless we see every single piece of evidence and have the chance ourselves to make our own mind up about it. And even then, I don't think we're going to believe it.
Well, I'm open to believing it, but I'm like you. I want to see the evidence that led them to the conclusion that he killed himself.
Yeah.
Because I'm not on a mission. I'm not, my objective is not to topple the federal government or to indict our leaders. I'm cheering for Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and the President of the United States and all of these fine people that they put in their cabinet, that he's put in his cabinets. But we have to do it differently and better and truthfully than the Democrats did, or else we are no better than the Democrats. And right now, there is a piece of me, a part of my brain that are sounding alarms, and I just don't know what to make of it. In 2023, that was 2 years ago, did it take a lot of courage to do this documentary?
I people seem to People tell me that it did, and I guess so, but I actually felt called to do it. I am a woman of faith. I prayed about the information that I found and asked God, what do I do with this? Because I feel like I should be doing something. And the idea for the film is what came to me. I had never made a documentary before. So for me, when I am operating on faith, and even if I don't know what I'm doing and I have to figure it out, I don't have the time. I didn't take the time to think about, am I afraid? I just went out and did uncomfortable things.
Well, whether
There
you were
was
afraid
some,
or not, I admire the fact that you did it, and I
thank you.
really commend you. And I'm so, as one human being, I am eternally grateful for it because, as I said earlier, I just can't think of a more heinous crime than to take advantage of an innocent and child that is incapable of taking care of themselves. And I just think that is the low of the low. Why would someone do that? Other than the
Well, yeah,
obvious.
yeah. Other than the obvious
But
is
I can't imagine that the teachers and the librarians and the people that are allowing this information and encouraging that this information be stored in the bookshelves of our schools are doing it because of some sexual perverse belief that they hold or that they want to convert a generation of children to deviant behavior.
Well, John, some of the people, that is exactly why they're doing it. There is
Well, they're
no,
sick. They
they're
shouldn't be
sick.
teachers. They should flunk the psychological exam.
Right. But it's not just the teachers, it's the librarians, it's the teachers' unions, it's all of the outside organizations that are able to operate in our schools, like Planned Parenthood and the Human Rights Campaign. They come in with sexual materials also, and they're all in it together. The ACLU is suing the city of Huntington Beach, California right now because they got a new city council in, and the city council said we're going to take in the public libraries, we're going to take the sexually explicit books out of the children and young adult section, and we're going to put them in a restricted section for adults only,
Yeah,
or
where the
that need
teachers and the
parental
librarians can
consent.
go on lunch break.
Right.
I'm in favor of that. That
What,
way we know
take
that way we know who the deviants are.
Right. Well, the librarians and the ACLU are fighting the city, and they went and got two ballot measures put on for a special election that's coming up on June 10th, and they're out there campaigning for these books to be kept in the hands of children.
And how do they intellectually advance their argument? I mean,
They lie.
and what do they say?
So one of the lies is if you take these books out of the hands of children, it is a First Amendment violation. That is absolutely not the truth. In 1982, there was a Supreme Court case called Island Trees School District versus Pico, in which case the Supreme Court ruled that a school board, for example, or cannot take books out of a classroom or a library because of political ideologies that they don't like. So that would be a First Amendment violation. But they can remove the books if they are sexually explicit and have no educational value. And that's what these books are. So there's no First Amendment violation. There are prior Supreme Court cases that explain easily, the Roth case, the Miller case, that obscenity is not protected speech. So there's that. Then they'll tell you that these books are about the reason we want the books removed is because we're homophobes or we're racist. So, for example, there's one book about a young Black girl, and she is repeatedly raped by both her mother and her father. These rape scenes are graphic in a way that you would throw up if you heard them. And I do read them on my social media channel so that people know the truth. But if you say that stuff is too sexually explicit for kids, they'll say you're just a racist. So they lie, and they don't tell the whole truth about the sexually explicit content.
So that story is in a book that is in a public library,
Oh,
in a school
that
library. You're
that
saying?
particular story is a book called Push, and it is in public schools and libraries all around the country. Probably, I would venture to say in all 50 states. And it was made into a movie called Precious, and the book was so vulgar that they had to tone it down to get the movie to an R rating. But it's in children's hands.
Well,
That's just one. I mean, there's literally hundreds of these books now because they're producing them at a rate that I can't even believe, and a lot of them have cartoon-like pictures, and so it'll be an illustration, and then like a cartoony, fun description of sex acts. It's wild, it's evil like we've never seen.
So I consider myself a staunch believer in the First Amendment. I also am a believer in the Supreme Court's interpretation of the First Amendment. And you cannot shout fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire, because
Right.
that may result in harm to other people, innocent people. If this is not the equivalent, or even worse, of an abuse of freedom of speech, then I'm not aware of another one.
Yes, absolutely is an abuse. But even if we put the First Amendment argument aside and we look at decades of research on children who were sexually abused, so childhood sexual abuse has two forms: non-contact and contact. So non-contact sexual abuse is grooming, and it is teaching children to talk about sex and giving them ideas that they're not ready for and forcing these topics on them, which is what's happening in schools and libraries across the country. And children who are groomed are more likely to sexually abuse each other, Now they're groomed and ready to be sexually abused by an older sibling or a coach or an uncle, and they're ready to talk about sex with online predators who they meet in a chat room, and then they'll maybe even meet that person in real life. This is what we're doing. We're preparing children the way Ghislaine Maxwell had to prepare her victims before she got them to have sex with Epstein and his friends. We're doing all that work for her.
So grooming is a term that is kicked around a lot, and I'm sorry, I'm showing my naivete. I don't really know what that means. What I mean, I think I know what it means. It's teaching children that the abnormal is normal, and that it's okay for them to engage in it. Did I state it somewhat correctly?
It's close. So the first part of grooming is developing trust. So if say you're Ghislaine Maxwell and you find a 14-year-old girl who you want to bring into your sex trafficking ring, you develop trust with her. You flatter her, you buy her presents, you take her out, you become a friend, you tell her a joke, you share a secret with her and say, this is just between us. And little by little, you get the relationship comfortable. The next thing you do is then start introducing more and more and more increasingly sexual topics, so that she then becomes used to those sexual topics, and then that turns into physical sexual abuse. So it's like a seductive process. Now, when you're dropping your child off at school or the library, there's an implicit trust there. Americans, I did it. I was foolish enough to think that I could trust teachers and librarians. I just dropped my kid off there, and the kid thinks I can trust every adult in this building because mommy and daddy dropped me off here. And obviously they wouldn't put me someplace that I wasn't safe. So you already have the step one, trust is built. Now you start introducing sexual topics to these kids and they become normalized. Everything that, there's one book I have that's for 9-year-olds that has like an whole page of illustrations of penises and vaginas, and they're cut in half, and the assignment on the page for 9-year-olds is to draw the other half of the penis and draw the other half of the vagina, and then you can color it in. What are we doing?
God.
Yeah.
As you're talking about this stuff and establishing trust and sending someone to school, I just started to flash back, and I traced all 12 years. Well, actually, the program is called The Truth. Okay, all 13 years of my primary and secondary school education.
I went to college for 5 years. Yeah.
I like the 8th grade so much that I went back for a second spin. Anyhow, I just quickly went back to my first grade teacher and brought it all the way forward. I can't remember or recall a single teacher that I had that I would have suspected then or now that had this kind of deviant behavior or would want to impose it on others. So I don't know whether, and then I started questioning myself, was that because of the time that we lived in, or was I just lucky and sheltered? I don't know. But I do know that when we started our day in grammar school and junior and senior high, that we started the day with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and we all stood. No one took a knee, and we prayed, and someone would be honored by being asked to read a chapter or a verse from the Bible. Frankly, it was one of the most enjoyable parts of my school day, which may explain why I didn't do so good in the 8th grade. But that, notwithstanding that, do you think that this is somehow reflective of the culture that we live in that has become so permissive that we stopped allowing prayer in school, that we forbid any real teaching of the Bible, that my generation that lived through the Vietnam era and were notable for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, are all the chickens coming home to roost now, perhaps?
I absolutely believe that. I think there are a lot of reasons. The biggest one is that as a culture in America, we've taken God and we've put him in the back seat. I mean, he's in the trunk, actually, at this point. He's not even in the back seat. He's not even in the car with us anymore. And it's people, like us now who are pointing it out and saying, when you take God out of everything, we have lost the thread on morality completely, on sexual immorality, on alcohol and drugs, on theft. Look at what's going on with our politicians who just let criminals rob and rape and assault citizens, and they just put them on the revolving door, and then they're back out on the street. Nothing that mattered only 20, 30, 40 years ago seems to matter anymore in mainstream culture. You drop in modern feminism, and we've taken men out of the equation. A man who's strong is toxic. A woman, her job making spreadsheets for some corporation that doesn't care about her is more important than raising a child. And in fact, they've now started to take abortion and frame it as health care and a human right. So everything that we know has been turned upside down. And at the end of it, because I'm a woman of faith, I just see this as a massive battle of good and evil that we have to be fighting every day.
So what was your motivation? I mean, this is a pretty esoteric topic that you've stumbled upon, and that it sounds like you have devoted a significant part of your life to exposing. What motivated you? What place were you coming from when you started?
It started when Donald Trump went down the escalator, and I started to realize that the mainstream media was going to lie to me about every single thing that they reported on. And that lack of trust in the mainstream media, it shined when I saw that they were saying that books were being banned by right-wing crazy parents who were taking books out of children's hands. And I, of course, being like you, a staunch defender of the First Amendment, I said, oh, censorship is terrible. That's what the Nazis did. I don't want that. But I also didn't trust the mainstream media. So I went out and I bought those books. And when I read them, I got so furious that these people were lying and bullying the American people in a way so that they could hurt children. And I hate bullies, John, a lot. And anybody that's going to try to take parental rights away from parents, that's going to try to harm children and lie to parents and say that we're not harming them, needs to be stopped. And I just got a fire in me that said I have to help protect the children. My son is 21 years old now. He still needs me as a mother, but he doesn't need me to protect him from his fourth grade teacher. But I care about my country, and I love my country so much that I see this entire generation that they're trying to indoctrinate and traumatize, and I have to do what I can to stop it.
Well, I'm very proud of you, and again, I commend you, and I mean that sincerely, for the work that you're doing. Have you gotten blowback from it? Have you gotten pushback? Any serious consequences from exposing these things?
Thankfully, no physical harm. I have been doxxed. I had a YouTube channel that in only a few months I grew to like 11,000 subscribers, and one day YouTube took it away. I also had just last month, I had a TikTok channel that I had 80,000 followers on. They just took it away, just gone, and that was like a reasonably nice source of income for me some months. So I keep getting things like that happening. I get a lot of trolls call me names and, make fun of my looks and things that just do not matter to me at all, but they never have a good argument against what the things that I'm saying about why we should be protecting children. They tell the lies, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. They tell the First Amendment lies, and I brush those off and I keep moving forward.
Well, the most scary thing you said to me is that Google, who owns YouTube, and TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese, would take your information down and remove you from their channels. Mm-hmm. Leading me to believe that this traces back to some pretty high levels in our society. That's scary stuff.
It's very scary. Their terms and conditions for using their platforms are very squishy and very, there's no way
Very
they're written in
subjective.
such a way that they can use them however they want to.
Yeah.
And there are obviously people who are, behind it, who are happy to censor opposing viewpoints. I mean, look what happened during the pandemic, how the government was involved with Meta and Google and Twitter in suppressing, and even questions about how the government was handling everything, and the medications that were coming out. So they're in on it. There's no question. How deep and how high this goes, it is above my pay grade. But I know it's there. My gut tells me it's there, and I'm living the consequences.
So, as our listeners have frequently heard me say, when I get a complicated issue, I try and map it out on a continuum, kind of from the benign to the absurdly ridiculous extreme. And so, as I'm thinking about this, um, you know, on the left side of the continuum, I would put Lassie, Dennis the Menace, The Wonderful World of Disney, and Ed Sullivan. Those were the shows that we grew up watching. And I would say that that's the wholesome America that I loved. As you move out on the continuum, I would put immorality as a possible explanation for the horrible things that you're sharing with us today. And then I would say next out on the continuum would be money. And then far right on the continuum, I would say foreign influence. And I have no evidence to support any of that. The only evidence that I have is that something is horribly, horribly wrong. Horribly wrong to the point where it makes me ill. And it also makes me very sad to think that there are people in this world evil enough that they would corrupt and basically ruin the life of a young child who is defenseless to take care of themselves and push back against this sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
I
There is
do
a little
wonder.
bit of evidence.
Well,
Just
and
one.
that's why
Yeah.
I posed it. I'd like to know your take.
Well, for example, think about TikTok. TikTok is owned by ByteDance. It's a Chinese company, and they are controlled by the CCP. So why wouldn't the Chinese Communist Party want to create an app and push absolute absurdities onto the American people? So if I were to create a TikTok video and a whole channel about injecting puberty blockers and turning trans as a child, for teaching children how to be trans, I wouldn't be blocked. But when I go on there, part of the reasons I got in trouble there was because I said things like men can't get pregnant, and transgenders shouldn't be in the military because they have a mental health condition and they require tremendous medicalization that isn't fair to our military and weakens our military. Things like that.
Well,
The Chinese
and
Communist Party stops because it's common sense.
I promise you I'm not being contentious, but I disagree 50% with what you said about your thesis that if you introduced a video or a short on puberty blockers and becoming trans that you wouldn't be blocked.
Oh, they were on there.
I happen to believe that you would be blocked.
Not on TikTok.
I think you would in the communist China
Oh,
country.
yes, their
But
TikTok doesn't have that stuff.
they're happy to dump it in here all day long. And so that really
Yes, I should have made that
no,
clarifying
I'm
point. Yes.
I'm having fun with you.
Yeah,
But I'm also
I love it.
I'm having fun to illustrate a point. I don't think China would allow this stuff to be put on their platforms inside communist China for a second. But they're perfectly willing to dump it in this country in large volumes. And that's really kind of the point that I was getting to.
Yeah.
When I go out on the continuum, I don't think that there are enough sinister, immoral, decrepit people that immorality could account for it. I do think that there are people that would do this for money, but I still don't. I don't want to believe that there are enough of them to be able to conduct this on the level and the scale that I think that you're describing. What I do believe, though, is that the one country that wants to tear us apart, that wants to divide us, that wants to seed discontent at every opportunity they can get, is the Chinese Communist Party, which has made a very public. They've been very publicly out about their desire to control and dominate the world by 2050. I think the United States is number one in their target. And we just had a person on that we interviewed earlier today about George Floyd and all of the things that we have not been told about George Floyd and his death and the narrative that has evolved around it and all of the riots that were in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. And again, it's just public discontent at every turn. And I definitely, without evidence, without any direct evidence, do suspect that the CCP is behind a lot of this. What say you?
Well, I do believe that they are behind a lot of it. I believe that their money, they've infiltrated our nation in 100 ways. So one, through social media. They also are buying up lands for decades now, have been buying up lands in the United States.
Farmland around our military bases. Oh
Yeah,
my.
they're influencing and paying off some politicians. We had why am I blanking on his name? The guy who was, had the affair with the Chinese spy.
Oh, that would be my favorite member of Congress, Eric Swalwell.
Yes.
Nancy
yes.
Pelosi, though, she told you that she had no concerns about Eric Swalwell.
None at all.
Now, her husband just does happen to be in the investment world and has a lot of business dealings with China, as evidently her son does, because she took him on a diplomatic mission to Taiwan. Okay.
Right. So I think the evidence is coming up more and more. There's been major Chinese investment in our universities. Is it no coincidence that all of a sudden our university students hate America? And they're all being paid with pop-up. They all have the same pop-up tent in order to make a pop-up city on a campus quad and destroy, daily operations at some of our most prestigious universities. It's no coincidence.
I think
concerted, it's purposeful.
I think you may have brought up one of the most important and salient points, and that is the CCP's influence in our higher education in particular. I mean, did anybody ever question why the Chinese are sponsors of the Biden Center on the University of Pennsylvania campus? Nobody denies it, but nobody is up in arms about it. And then just this morning, I became aware of the fact that Duke University, perhaps one of the best colleges and universities in the Southeast, has a campus in Beijing, for crying out loud. Good God, what is going on?
We have an entire generation who is lost and brainwashed into hating this country. But there is good news. So there's generation, I think it's Z, children around, I call them children, excuse me, young people around my son's age, around 21, are moving further and further conservative in their values and in their living, because they're looking around and they are realizing that the people their generation are miserable. They're poor, they're angry, they hate themselves, they hate everybody and everything around them, and they're just naturally, instinctively rebelling against that and saying, I want to find the best in myself, the best in everyone around me. I want to succeed. I don't feel like a victim. I feel like I can have some control over how I live and how I go about, and I don't want to marry a partner who has slept with hundreds of people. I want a simpler life, and it's coming. And those young kids are like a beacon of hope for me.
Well, I agree with you. I hope the trend continues, and I hope that we can capitalize on the momentum and make it greater, because this is a wonderful country. And you and I had the good fortune of being able to live as children here. And I walked from North Main Street to South Main Street as a 4-year-old with my dog Spot in Mount Gilead, Ohio, on a 3/4 of a mile on sidewalks with no one, just me and Spot. And there were no kids on milk boxes, and there were sure as hell no books in the library about having kinky sex. It's shocking, and again, Elena, thank you so much for coming on. Where can we watch the movie, the documentary?
You can watch it at AmericanGroomerFilm.com, and it is free to watch because it is far too important to put behind a paywall.
Free. Our last guest was charging $24.95 for her documentary. I knew I liked you, Elena Barbera. Thank you, and I'm going to go get the movie, and thank you for coming on. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.